Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I'm joined by Christoph, the one, the only.
Hey, that's me, the one, the only Christoph. Thanks for having me, Captain Dale.
You're more than welcome, as always.
Well, thanks.
All right, so we're going to jump into more battles from the Spanish-American War, which is part of the Banana Wars. So, are you ready to get underway?
Oh, yeah. I love bananas.
Right, so the Battle of Guantanamo Bay.
I've heard of that place.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Have you been a visitor? Have you been able to be a visitor?
I can neither confirm nor deny my presence in that location.
You do realize that always means yes when people say that.
Is that what that means? Can neither confirm nor deny. That's what that means.
Ah. All right. So this happened between June 6th and June 10th. So this is back in Cuba, of course. We've already talking quite a bit about Cuba. So we're just going to jump right into the battle. So the first successful U.S. attempt against Guantanamo Bay occurred on June 6th when the light cruiser USS Marblehead, under the command of Commander Bowman H. McCullough, and the auxiliary cruisers USS St. Louis and USS Yankee arrived. So Commander McCullough had been detached from Admiral Sampson and his blockading fleet at Santiago in order to do a reconnaissance of the bay for a naval base. The captain of the St. Louis was ordered to cut the cables which had connected the small station on Fisherman's Point and was also a connection point between Cuba and Haiti.
Oh, okay.
To the outside world. No more communications for you. The St. Louis had already tried earlier, but had been driven out of the bay by a Spanish gunboat, the Sandoval. But this time, she's back. And there's 3 of them.
Oh.
So they come into the bay at dawn, and Spanish soldiers were gathering at a blockhouse on a hill that is called McCullough Hill. That's its modern name.
I was going to say, that does not sound like any Cuban hill I know.
It's named after the captain here.
Okay.
Or commander, but captain.
Let's see how this plays out then. I have a strong feeling now. I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So the blockhouse and the village were cleared very quickly by fire from the Marblehead and their 6-pounders. They also fired 1 5-inch shell. So this boat had cannons and turrets.
Wow.
Yeah. The Spanish gunboats Olivardo and Sandoval came down the channel to meet this attack, but took one look at them and noped out.
Yeah, there's some wisdom in that. I mean...
So a single cannon on the fort of Cayo del Toro opened fire on the Marblehead, but it was not effective. But they did continue firing until they were silenced.
They were silenced, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the nice way of saying they got destroyed.
I got you. No. That's... I'll see if I can come up with some other idioms that we can use as a way to say that they were destroyed.
So this time, the communication cables were successfully cut, and now Guantanamo has no communication with the outside world.
Uh-oh.
Yes, no telegram for you. So when the guys cutting the cables get back to the fleet, the Marblehead now has 2 Cuban officers who had been brought to the ship from Leeward Point of Guantanamo Bay. They had been sent to Admiral Sampson by General Calixto Garcia to report that the Cuban forces, whose outposts occupied positions on the coast from the mouth of the Gutierrez to a point about 15 miles west of Santiago, were at the disposition of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this made the Americans very happy, and, they kept in close communication with their Cuban rebel allies.
I could see that, yeah.
So, with the decision to establish a base at Guantanamo Bay, the 1st Battalion of Marines, consisting of 6 companies of around 650 men, were ordered to proceed in the converted transport USS Panther and join the fleet off of Santiago. So they get there on June 9th of 1898. And while they were getting there, the Navy commander, McCullough, approved a campsite selected for them by Lieutenant Colonel Huntington. This was on a flat ridge on the top of a hill above the village on Fisherman's Point. And it was designated Camp McCullough. This guy's getting lots of things named after him.
Man, no kidding. I'm glad his last name wasn't like Stinky Butt. You know what I mean?
So the Marines landed unopposed on June 10th with most of their companies, about 5 out of 6 of them.
Okay.
They left their artillery aboard to unload the ship. They're like, you guys are artillery guys. You guys can just unload everything.
Yeah.
And they had to do this because the captain of the Panther, Commander Ritter, he was like, you're not using my guys for this.
Yeah, no kidding. Unload your own stuff.
He also did not allow the Marines to unload the remainder of their small arms ammunition because he said that they needed it as ballast.
Okay. You can't get rocks or something? That just seems ammo's pretty important.
Use your trim tanks, maybe?
That's an even better solution. I didn't even know that was a thing.
So Lieutenant Colonel Huntington, he went to Commander McCullough, and he's like, your captain over here on the Panther, he's like not giving us our ammunition. Can you like do something about that?
That was a really good impersonation, by the way. It sounds... I couldn't even tell it was you.
He was from California.
I could tell. Everything ends like in a question?
He's from the Valley.
Right.
And so McCullough was like, give those Marines their ammo. Come on, guy. Quote, sir, break out immediately and land with the crew of the Panther. 50,000 rounds of 6mm ammunition. And in the future, do not require Colonel Huntington to break out or land his stores with members of his command. Use your own officers and men for this purpose. And supply the commanding officer of Marines promptly with anything they may desire.
Ooh.
Yeah, he got dressed down.
He got told. That's right.
Yeah. So the Marines went in and burned the crude huts of the village and the remains of the blockhouse. Because they were like, you know what? There might be yellow fever in there. Let's take this precaution. And by the way, arson.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Well, hold on. Wasn't ready. Ugh, all right.
So the Spanish had left so quickly that they left behind clothing, money, jewelry, and weapons.
That is fast.
Yeah. The battalion then raised the American flag, which was the first U.S. military unit to do that on Cuban soil. The Marines then sent out detachments to occupy a 150-foot hill because that hill would not be able to be supported by the main body at the camp. Then they established 2 forward operating positions, and one at a road junction several hundred yards ahead of the camp. This is known as the Crossroads, and one that is known as the Bridge. This was a road a mile and a half from the American camp where the Spanish forces were bringing artillery, or where they were expected to, at least.
Okay.
This was not the most ideal tactical position. On one side, they had the sea, and they did not have mutual support between their outposts, and a lot of thorny scrub and cactus and hills in front of them, including dense jungle.
Yeah, that's not it's not a good position to be in.
Yeah. So they continued setting things up and unloading, and then shortly after sundown, the Marines finally had their first meal. This consisted of coffee and hardtack.
Sounds good to me.
Really? You want some hardtack?
Oh, no, just coffee. I was just like, I'd go for a cup of coffee. I'll save the hardtack for later.
Okay. So soon after that, there was an alarm. For the very first time, they heard voices and saw lights, but they were not attacked.
Were they ghosts?
No, they were Spanish forces.
Okay. Because it's just voices and lights. I just,
No, what happened is that the Spanish forces were very, 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 very short of food.
Oh.
So they wanted to put off their attack until the Americans had finished unloading.
Oh.
Because they were hoping to take their supplies.
I see. Oh, man, that's sad.
Yeah. So throughout the night, the Marines worked, and they finished unloading all their supplies and equipment, except for the artillery pieces and ammunition. So the rest of the men came ashore, and then the isolated hill outpost was abandoned. The only sound that the Marines heard was the cooing of mourning doves, which the Marines would learn very quickly that this was a call used by Spanish loyalist guerrilla forces.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I think I heard some Spanish loyalist guerrilla forces outside my house yesterday morning. So you're freaking me out a little bit.
So the colonel from the Cuban army comes ashore to assist the Marines to provide intelligence about the enemy. And this colonel reported that the major Spanish force in the area had its headquarters at the well of Cuzco. This is about 2 miles southeast of them. And this well provided the only fresh water in the area.
Ooh.
This force had about 500 soldiers and guerrillas, and then was joined by the troops that were driven from their landing point. So this was pretty much the only heavy threat to the U.S. base. The major told them that taking the well and destroying it would force the Spanish forces to retreat all the way to Guantanamo Bay. So as they were getting briefed from the colonel, gunshots start ringing out from in front of them. Lieutenant Colonel Huntington then leads most of his Marines forward, but the thorns and thickets and underbrush and cactus pretty much made it so only one company was able to get through. The thing about this attack is that they weren't expecting one. So there were no trenches. So they were pretty much just on open land, which was very dangerous for them.
Yeah, definitely.
So when the Spanish opened fire, they were using Mauser rifles, which was a rapid-firing weapon. The Marines did push them back after a lot of heavy fighting. And this pretty much went on from 0500 to nightfall.
That's a lot of fighting. My goodness.
Mm-hmm. Very long day. Afterwards, they found two privates, William Dunphy and James McCullough, who were posted about 100 yards ahead of the crossroads to keep watch. They found them shot dead and their bodies mutilated.
Ugh.
Their weapons, shoes, belts, and some of their clothing had been taken. This was the beginning of what Huntington's XO later called its 100 hours of fighting. The Marines now dig in and begin firing at the concealed Spanish forces. They finally bring their artillery ashore, and they start using their 3-inch artillery pieces. And also 2 6mm Colt Browning machine guns.
And those are serious. Those are serious.
Yeah. They were also aided by the Marblehead, shooting into the nearby hills.
I could see that. Turrets and cannons. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Now, the Spanish forces, they actually were tying large palm leaves to their uniforms as camouflage.
Oh, that's interesting.
And their ammunition was smokeless powder cartridges, so that made it even more difficult to locate them. So on the evening of June 12th, the Spanish forces came within 50 yards of Camp McCullough, and a very violent firefight began.
So, I'm guessing they were 50 yards probably from the perimeter of the jungle? Because it seems like they would still want to be in cover.
No, they came within 50 yards of the camp.
Oh, wow.
So the Marines opened up with their rifles, their machine guns, their artillery, and more than likely, this intense fire from everything kept the Spanish from overrunning the camp.
Wow.
After the action, the Marines went in to find out how many, if any, they had killed. They found several blood trails, but no bodies.
Okay.
Because the guerrillas were moving their wounded and dead to conceal their casualty figures.
That's pretty effective. I mean, this is a very unique opponent that I think the Americans haven't faced in a while.
The next day, the Marines are reinforced by about 60 Cubans. They had been equipped with rifles and U.S. Navy white sailor uniforms.
Okay.
I don't know why they agreed to that, but there you go.
Yeah, that seems unwise, I guess, for lack of a better term. I just don't understand.
Well, it might have been trying to make sure that the Marines knew that these guys were allies, not the enemy.
Oh, maybe so.
But, that's not good camouflage.
Not at all, no. Bright white against a backdrop of jungle?
Yeah. So these Cubans, though, were familiar with guerrilla tactics. So they deployed in pairs in front of the camp and burned the brush and undergrowth as they advanced, which destroyed the enemy's use of that cover.
Mm-hmm.
The Marblehead then steamed down the coast and shelled the well at Cuzco.
That seems odd to destroy. I understand the strategic importance of the well, and destroying it would cause them to flee to the next source of fresh water, but I would think capturing it would be enough, because then your troops could use the well, right?
Well, not if you're bringing in your own water supplies.
I guess that's true. Like, if you have water and they don't, that's a huge advantage.
The U.S. has a supply train. The local insurgents are having to rely on what they have there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So by nightfall on June 13th, the Marines are exhausted. They had not slept or rested for 100 hours. Relief and reinforcement was not possible because U.S. Army troops had not left the U.S. yet. And the fighting continued for 2 more days.
This is intense and it's a lot of fighting for a long time. I guess I know we're early into the description of the battles of this war, but this seems like the most intense fighting that probably took place.
Well, the Marines excel at this type of thing.
Well, I guess they're meeting the stiffest resistance. No shade on the Marines. They're doing what they do. But, I mean, the last time we spoke, it was bloodless, and the governor's like, yeah, we surrender.
Well, yeah, well, that's a Spanish government on a island. This is insurgents.
Yeah.
Trying to, take over their own government. Two completely different situations.
That's true. And I'm sure Cuba is getting... I think you mentioned in a previous episode how they're an extension of Spain. They're not a colony. They're almost like a... What is the word I'm looking for? Like an annexation. Like they're part of Spain. They're not under Spain. And so
yeah,
there's more zeal to defend it.
So now they are going to concentrate on that well.
Yeah, definitely.
So Marine Company C and D, which is about 160 men, joined by 50 Cubans, are going to approach Cuzco along the cliffs by the sea. A smaller Marine force would advance by an inland valley, was to be the picket line for the main force. And the USS Dolphin was assigned to support the attack from sea. So they start a combined U.S.-Cuban march on June 14th. It was, of course, slowed down by the rough terrain and the undergrowth and the heat.
Oh, yeah. This is in June, you say, right? Gih.
So they reach the hill around Cuzco Valley at around 1100. The Cubans were marching ahead of the Marines and were spotted by the enemy. So a race for the crest of the hill begins. The Marines and the Cubans reach the summit first under heavy fire from the Spanish and the guerrillas. And the smaller Marine force get up there as well, and they start putting in a crossfire into their flank, into the enemy's flank, the Spanish flank. This was actually the first known tactical use of machine gun fire for mobile fire support in offensive combat.
I was going to say, you mentioned the machine gun earlier in the episode, and I know they had the Maximus gun, like a Gatling gun, in the past, but this seems like the first advance in technology, as you were saying. Things kind of are starting to leapfrog toward the conclusion with tactics and weapons and everything that we see in World War I.
Yeah. Well, they were using the new M1895 Colt Browning machine guns.
Right.
So this allowed them to carry a lot of ammunition because of how light it was.
That's awesome. And I'm sure the insurgents wouldn't have seen anything like this in the past. It would have been completely new.
About halfway through the battle, the Cuban forces ran out of their ammunition.
Oh, man.
And so they were resupplied from the Marines. About 6 extra clips each, which is about 30 rounds. Yet none of the Americans ran short of ammunition at all.
They must have had I guess, between the Panther and what were the other ships? The Marblehead, they must have had a lot of stores. Like the ammo you mentioned at the beginning that they didn't want to unload. I'm sure they had copious amounts.
Well, this is we're also talk. What we're talking about here is how much ammo they took with them for this attack. They're not
Oh,
being resupplied.
oh, I see. So how do the Marines transport ammo at this time inland? Like they're going to a well via a valley. Are they using animal transportation, like horses or donkeys or something? Or
No, they have all this ammo strapped on them.
oh, it's just them. Okay.
Yeah.
My goodness. Way to go, Marines.
Any attack, that's the way it's going to be. Even now.
Yeah, I guess it's true. You want to have it there with you.
So the Marine captain, Captain Elliott, requests the Dolphin to provide fire support by shelling a Spanish blockhouse and nearby positions. There is a miscommunication, though, and the Dolphin starts dropping shells on the direct path of a small force of 50 Marines
Oh, no.
who were attempting to flank the Spanish position and to hopefully cut off any avenue of retreat. So Sergeant John H. Quick took a handkerchief onto a stick and, dodging enemy fire, went up to an exposed position on a ridge and started to flag the Dolphin, saying, "Adjust your fire."
Wow, that is gutsy.
Mm-hmm. War correspondent wrote, quote, Sergeant Quick arose and announced he was the signal man. He produced from somewhere a blue polka dot neckerchief as large as a quilt. He tied it on a long, crooked stick. Then he went to the top of the ridge and, turning his back on the Spanish fire, began to signal to the Dolphin. Again, we gave a man sole possession of a particular part of the ridge. We didn't want it. He could have had it and welcome. If the young sergeant had had the smallpox, the cholera, and the yellow fever, we could not have slid out with more celerity. As men have often said, it seemed as if there was in this war a god of battles who held his mighty hand before the Americans. As I looked at Sergeant Quick wig-wagging there amongst the sky, I would not have given a tin tobacco tag for his life. Escape for him seemed impossible. It seemed absurd to hope that he would not be hit. I only hoped that he would be hit just a little, in the arm, the shoulder, or the leg. I watched his face, and it was as grave and serene as that of a man writing his own library. He was the very embodiment of tranquility in occupation. He stood there amid the animal-like babble of the Cubans, the crack of rifles, and the whistling snarl of the bullets, and wigwagging whatever he had to wigwag without heeding anything but his business. There was not a single trace of nervousness or haste. To say the least, a fight at close range is absorbing as a spectacle. No man wants to take his eyes from it until that time comes when he makes up his mind to run away. To deliberately stand up and turn your back to a battle is in itself hard work. To deliberately stand up and turn your back to a battle and hear immediate evidences of the boundless enthusiasm for which a large company of the enemy shoot at you from an adjacent thicket is, to my mind at least, a very great feat. One need not dwell upon the detail of keeping the mind carefully upon a slow spelling of an important coded message. I saw Quick betray only one sign of emotion as he swung his clumsy flag to and fro, an end of it once caught on a cactus pillar, and he looked sharply over his shoulder to see what it had. He gave the flag an impatient jerk. He looked annoyed.
That's crazy. I mean, that's, I guess, the height of duty and service, just like heedless of danger. I need to do this for my men because they're getting shelled.
That is what wins you medals.
Yes.
But that is also what saves lives.
Right. That's amazing. One of the things I enjoy most about doing this podcast with you is exploring these kind of stories that you don't really cover, or at least I didn't cover in school. We don't go in depth in the battles of America's conflicts. And when we see such stellar acts of bravery, that's just like, oh, that was overlooked in all of my textbooks, but that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. All right, so once Sergeant Quick finishes his message, the ship adjusts its aim. He then picks up his Lee rifle and resumes his place on the firing line. For what he did, he would receive the Medal of Honor, as he should.
Yes.
So the Dolphin shifts her fire onto the enemy camp and blockhouse, and by 1400, the Spanish had broken and fled the bunkhouse. Unfortunately, because of the friendly fire, they were not able to cut off a Spanish retreat, though they did capture a signaling station and heliograph equipment. So as the Spanish forces withdraw through a gully on the other side of the valley, the Marines opened fire at a distance of about 1,200 yards. The Spanish were unable to accurately return fire, allowing Marine Company B and the Cuban rebels to close the distance, firing as they advanced. The Spanish did attempt to concentrate their fire on the Cubans and managed to kill 2 of them, and then were forced back by Marine rifle fire. At which point they routed.
Yeah. It sounds... Once things got coordinated, it sounded like it all ended very quickly.
Yeah, 1530 is when the retreat was done, and that's when everything went silent. The Spanish had a lieutenant and 17 enlisted captured, and they suffered 60 dead and 150 wounded. They had left behind 30 of their 7mm Mauser rifles with ammunition.
Oh, wow.
The American casualties were 2 Marines and 2 Cuban rebels wounded, and 2 Cuban rebels killed.
That's less than I thought it would be.
The most serious casualties that the Marines had were from heat exhaustion.
I believe it.
There was 1 officer and 22 men were exhausted from the heat. These guys were taken on board the Dolphin, and they were transported by sea back to camp. Everybody else had to march.
Oof. So, yeah, that sounds rough. But at least they took care of the guys that had heat exhaustion. I'm guessing this is probably the first conflict America's been in where heat exhaustion becomes a more significant problem. Did this influence any kind of training that you underwent to prevent heat exhaustion? Is it just hydration, or is there some kind of conditioning that helps?
Well, what I went through is the same that we'd go through now on any job site. Stay hydrated. Limit your time in the sun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
This was at this time they were still learning about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I could see that.
So the Marines destroyed the blockhouse. They burned it, in fact, arson.
Oh, there we go.
And they destroyed the well. Now, the thing is, though, nobody was allowed to drink from it before it was destroyed, so the Marines didn't even get water.
Oh, I was just about to ask.
It took 2 hours for water to be brought from the Dolphin before the Marines were able to get water.
Well, kudos to them. Being in that hot environment with no water and with all that ammo strapped to you, that's... They must have lost 10 pounds in sweat.
The Spanish retreated in small groups to Guantanamo through the del Tono and the Cinemura. They thought that the U.S. would, chase them down. They fortified Dos Caminos, which is a small settlement at the crossing of 2 roads, and added several new blockhouses on the rail line. Apparently, the Spanish soldiers were very impressed by Marine firepower. Once they got to Guantanamo, they informed the general that they had been attacked by 10,000 Americans.
Oh my gosh.
So, because of that, the camp saw no further attacks.
Yeah, I mean, when you think you're outnumbered that bad and outgunned, there's no way you would. It would be suicide.
Yeah. And the camp was abandoned on August 5th of 1898. While this was happening, attention started to be focused on other areas of the bay. The Spanish were adding to their earthworks on Cayo de Toro, where they had 3 6.4-inch bronze guns and a modern 3.5-inch Krupp gun. At Guantanamo, on the bluff south of the village, they mounted 3 6.4 guns, and there was a small gunboat, the Sandoval, with a battery of 1 6-pounder and a automatic 1-pounder Maxim gun.
Ooh.
So Admiral Sampson then decides to shell the fort at Cayo del Toro on June 16th. He sends the USS Texas and Yankee to join up with the Marblehead, and the 3 ships firing temporarily dismounted 2 of the enemy's guns. They destroyed the buildings on the quay and drove the troops from all of the guns and their trenches. And the firepower reduced the Spanish fort within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And the Spanish scored no hits on any American warship.
That's astounding.
There was a little bit of an incident as the Americans steamed up the bay past Carasol's Point. A lookout on the Marblehead reported that the starboard propeller was fouled in a buoy.
Ooh.
So they stopped the engine, and the propeller is cleared of the quote-unquote buoy. This was in actuality a contact mine.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was successfully disarmed.
Oh, okay.
Later, they learned that they had actually passed through a field of 18 mines.
It's a lot of mines to not go off.
Yeah. They had actually gone through that area like a number of times. That was the first incident.
Wow.
Yeah, they ended up recovering 14 mines. They think that the failure of any of the mines to explode was because of mechanical faults and a healthy growth of barnacles.
A good use for barnacles. I never thought I'd see the day.
Now, they did mine. You want to hear about the minesweeping operation?
Yes, I was just thinking I used to be a minesweeper addict in my youth, but I'm sure it's completely different.
Oh, it is.
On Windows 3.1 versus real life.
So they did not have any specialized equipment. This involved 2 steam launches and 2 whaleboats.
Huh.
A launch and a whaleboat would be side by side, connected to the other launch and whaleboat by a rope with a chain drag in the center.
Okay.
And they swept the channel. When the drag met an obstruction, the boats came together and crossed the ends of the drag. The boats were then hauled carefully up to the mine. They brought the mine up to the surface and then disarmed it.
That's pretty bold.
2 times. 2 mines were brought up together.
Oh my gosh. And none of them blew?
Nope. None of them blew. They were all disarmed.
Wow. That's amazing.
But while this operation was going on, they were being fired on from a beach where 250 Spanish infantrymen were posted to guard the minefield.
Okay.
So they were like, we can't have this. So on June 25th, Lieutenant Colonel Huntington leads 2 companies of Marines and 40 Cubans in an amphibious assault. This ended up not being anything because the Spanish were like, we're leaving before you get here.
That's... Oof.
So Guantanamo Bay is now occupied by U.S. Forces.
Well, there we go. And we've been there ever since.
So the U.S. now centers on operations in Santiago. A expeditionary force of 17,000 under Major General William R. Shafter is landed east of the city at a small port between June 22nd and 25th without any opposition. A week later, on July 1st, the battles of El Caney and San Juan Hill ends in U.S. victories, and this opens up approaches to Santiago. On July 3rd in the morning, a demand is sent to the Spanish commander to surrender or suffer bombardment. That same morning, a Spanish fleet sails from Santiago Bay and is completely destroyed. July 15th is when a agreement is signed, and July 17th is when the U.S. occupies the city. So that is the Battle of Guantanamo Bay.
Wow. Fierce fighting, but still lopsided victory completely.
Yeah. I mean, it just shows you the power of the Marines. Because there was only 623 of them, and Spain had 5,000 infantry.
Yeah. And they withdrew because they were outgunned. I'm just the tactics and the firepower and the heroism. That's just very impressive.
Yeah. So next time we're going to dive into that naval battle.
Oh, nice.
We're not going to do that now because that's going to take a while.
Okay. Well, yeah, you want to give it the proper due.
Right.
The proper attention to detail.
So what we're going to do is we're going to honor one of our fallen heroes with the help of herocards.us. And today we're going to honor Lieutenant Colonel George A. Davis, Jr. of the United States Air Force. He served with the 334th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Wing, 5th Air Force. He received the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 3 Silver Stars, 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 10 Air Medals, and a Purple Heart.
Wow.
His date of sacrifice was February 10th, 1952. Killed in action in North Korea. He was 31 years old. To be a flying ace, you have to be credited with shooting down several enemy aircraft during combat. It didn't happen often in the 20th century, and it rarely happens now. Air Force Major George A. Davis, Jr., a Medal of Honor recipient, is one of only a handful of U.S. military pilots to hold the distinction of being an ace in 2 wars.
Wow.
Davis was born December 1st, 1920, in the central Texas town of Dublin. But he grew up with his parents and 8 siblings in Morton, in the northwest part of the state. Davis went to Harding College in Arkansas and then returned home. He worked there briefly before joining the Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet on March 21st, 1942. About a year later, he finished his flight training and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. Davis was shipped off to the Pacific during World War II, where he became an ace in a P-47 Thunderbolt, shooting down 7 enemy aircraft during 266 combat missions in 19 months. After the war, Davis stayed in the service as it transitioned to the Air Force. He continued to fly fighter jets and served as a flight commander and air inspector at various military bases. He was also a member of the Sombre Dancers demonstration team in California, the forerunner of the famed Thunderbirds. Davis was promoted to major in February 1951, a few months before he was sent to Korea. There, Davis was named the commander of the 334th Squadron, 4th Fighter Interceptor Group. Within a few months, he became the leading ace of the Korean War. On February 10, 1952, Davis was leading 4 F-86 Sabre jets on a patrol mission near the Manchurian border. One of the jets was forced to back off because it ran out of oxygen. The remaining Sabres continued, and Davis and wingman First Lieutenant William Littlefield noticed 12 MiG-15s Soviet fighter jets speeding towards some Allied fighter bombers doing low-level operations. Even though his team was outnumbered, Davis quickly dove towards the enemy jets. He flew into the back of their formation and shot down one of them. Despite taking enemy fire, he kept attacking, shooting down a second enemy fighter. From there, Davis could have sped up to get away from the enemy that was firing on him, but instead, he chose to reduce his speed so he could try to shoot down a third MiG. While pursuing that fighter, his aircraft suffered a direct hit. Davis's plane spiraled out of control and crashed into a mountain about 30 miles south of the Yalu River. Littlefield reported the 31-year-old's body was never recovered. Thanks to his bravery, the friendly fighter bombers were able to succeed in their operation. Davis's final combat mission was his 60th in Korea, and it marked his 14th enemy downing of the war. In 1953, Davis was posthumously promoted to lieutenant colonel. His wife, Doris, received the Medal of Honor on his behalf at a ceremony at Reese Air Force Base, Texas, on May 14, 1954. His parents and 3 children, one of whom he had never met, also attended.
Wow.
During both wars, Davis racked up an impressive number of decorations, including 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 10 Air Medals, 3 Silver Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross. Davis's contribution to air attacks in both wars will always be remembered. A Veterans Memorial was dedicated to him in Lubbock, Texas, in 1990. His name is also inscribed on the Walls of the Missing at the National Memorial of the Pacific in Honolulu. So, Lieutenant Colonel George A. Davis, Jr., we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, XO, take us out.
Will do, Captain. So thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today and learning a little bit more about our involvement in world affairs and conflict. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to rate us on your favorite podcast app, iTunes, YouTube. We're on YouTube, so you can rate us there if you like, or I guess thumbs up us. Send us a comment. You can do that either in the app or you can email us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We are also on X Twitter with the handle USNHistoryPod. And so you can tweet or message at us and say, hey, those guys are great, or, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. I was there in the Spanish-American War and they got it all wrong, or whatever. We would love to hear from you. If you go to the show notes, you can find this information. You can also find a link to our Discord channel and also to the hero cards that Dale mentions at the end of every episode, if you're interested in learning more about that. I think that's everything except for we do have a subscriber option if you'd like access to more content in exchange for supporting these humble podcasters. So we would be appreciative if you would. And in return, we'll give you some more stuff. So I think that's everything, Captain. Did I forget anything?
If you leave us a comment, we will actually share it with you all. So we did receive one on YouTube from the handle at BobPZ3DC. And this person said, I served aboard the USS Peacock, MSC-198, from 1960 until 1962. Came on board as an RM-3 and advanced to RM-2 while on board. I really enjoyed my time on the Peacock, small crew, and saw lots of Japanese ports that bigger ships couldn't. I retired from the Navy in 1977 as a Chief Petty Officer at 37 years old. And they left this comment on the USS Peacock episode.
Nice. Well, that's cool.
So if you want to be mentioned, leave a comment, leave a review, and we will mention you.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody.
And with that, we're going to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.